I'm Dr. Robert F. Mullen, and this is video number 8 in our series on proactive neuroplasticity for recovery from social anxiety and related conditions. Now, the topic of this video is coping mechanisms, strategies we devise to mitigate our situational fears, anxieties, and triggers. Coping mechanisms help us cope with stress, anxiety, and other negative emotions. They range from practice skills in recovery, such as grounding, reframing, and rational response, to everyday stress reducers like gardening, journaling, and listening to music. Now, it's important to remember that healthy coping mechanisms are not one-size-fits-all. They are situationally and individually adaptive, understanding that each person's journey is unique and subject to different triggers requiring different responses. So we will address these mechanisms in 2 segments. This first video focuses on the psychological benefits of coping methods and the 3 primary mechanisms, which are called grounding, reframing, and rational response. In part 2, or video number 9, we'll delve into secondary coping mechanisms and their appropriate utilizations, providing us with a comprehensive understanding of the most effective coping strategies for mitigating our situational fears and anxieties. Coping mechanisms are tools and techniques that help us manage and alleviate our situational anxieties and triggers. Now, it's important to recognize what works for one person may not work for another, or what works for you in one specific situation may not be as effective in other situations. So thankfully, there's a rich diversity of coping mechanisms available, from controlled breathing and distractions to journaling or engaging in a hobby. And these tools can be adapted to our responses and reactions to triggers, alleviating the associated stress and providing emotional comfort and security in feared situations. Now, the primary goal of recovery from social anxiety and related conditions is to mitigate our irrational fears and anxieties. And this is achieved through a powerful and proven 3-pronged approach designed to address the root causes of our anxieties and fears. But the goal is clear: to overcome our fears and anxieties and react and respond appropriately to the triggers they generate. Our first objective is to offset or overwhelm our abundance of negative thoughts and behaviors with healthy, productive ones. Our second objective is to produce positive neurological stimulation to offset the abundance of negative information in our brain's metabolism. And this is where we utilize the science of proactive neuroplasticity, the deliberate, repetitive neural input of positive information. Personal affirmations and rational responses are excellent examples of this process, which is under the absolute jurisdiction of the individual in recovery. And simultaneously, we continue the process of regenerating self-esteem through positive reinforcement and mindfulness of our assets, utilizing methods targeted toward the individual. So why do we need coping mechanisms? Well, without coping mechanisms, healthy or otherwise, we can experience decompensation. And decompensation is the inability to generate an effective psychological stress response, resulting in personality disturbance or disintegration. Cognitive distortions and other harmful defense mechanisms, such as projection, avoidance, and isolation, can exacerbate our social anxiety. So understanding and adopting productive coping mechanisms to address our situational triggers is crucial to recovery. Now, a situation is a set of circumstances the facts, conditions, and incidents affecting us at a particular time in a specific place. Feared situations such as public speaking or social interaction provokes thoughts and behaviors that negatively impact our activities and relationships. By understanding how we react to these feared situations, we can better prepare ourselves and apply the appropriate coping mechanisms, equipping us to face them with less vulnerability and more confidence. Two types of situations concern us. The anticipated situation, like giving a scheduled presentation or a doctor's appointment, and the unexpected, such as a sudden change in plans or an emergency. Anticipated situations are those we know in advance, can provoke our anxieties and triggers. They can be one-off situations, a job interview or social event, or recurring situations such as the classroom or our daily work environment. Unexpected situations catch us by surprise. Stress-provoking events like a missing wallet, an accident on the freeway, or a last-minute project at work. Anticipating our feared situation in advance allows us to craft a structured plan to combat our fears and anxieties. And this preparation provides a sense of relief and enables us to develop situationally focused coping mechanisms. Now, in recovery, we rely on graded exposure or systematic desensitization. It involves gradually and repeatedly exposing ourselves to the feared situation in a controlled and safe environment, thus reducing our sensitivity over time. But confronting a feared situation without a strategy and functional coping mechanisms is akin to jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. However, with functional coping mechanisms such as controlled breathing, positive affirmations, and visualization techniques, we can regain emotional control and effectively manage our stress in challenging situations. Knowing how to respond effectively to unexpected situations can be daunting. When dealing with a scheduled event or one that meets regularly, we can plan accordingly. Strategizing for an unforeseen situation is like playing bridge. We know what's in our hand, but we don't know which card to play until we see the others on the table. So that's why we assemble what I call an emergency preparedness kit. Various practice coping mechanisms that we've honed and proven effective in workshop environments, providing us with security and reassurance. The coping mechanisms are essential tools for managing emotional stress. And there are three primary coping mechanisms most effective when confronted by situational triggers. And these psychological tools are called grounding, reframing, and rational response. Grounding is a powerful tool we utilize to shift our attention away from our anxiety-provoking thoughts, memories, and fears by focusing on our physical presence. It is a technique that empowers us to take control of our emotional state by rechanneling our attention. So whenever we feel anxious or stressed, we can use grounding techniques or physical distractions to distance ourselves from the emotional trigger. Grounding can provide immediate relief, helping us alleviate our situational fears and automatic negative thoughts. So if we find ourselves in moments of stress or panic, grounding techniques can help our body relax and return to the physical moment, giving us a sense of control over our emotions. Now, one of the clinically promoted grounding exercises is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. This method reconnects us to the present moment by engaging our 5 senses. Here's how it works. We deliberately focus on 5 things we see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we hear, 2 things we can smell, and 1 thing we can taste. By doing so, we shift our attention away from our triggers and into our physical presence, helping to alleviate our emotional distress. So I have mixed emotions about this approach because it can be cumbersome. I mean, there are enough things going on in a situation to be so precise. So if this exercise feels overwhelming, any form of physical distraction or diversion is helpful. See, it's crucial to remember that coping mechanisms are not a one-size-fits-all solution. They are subjective and unique to each individual, and the most effective ones are often self-devised. This awareness empowers us to focus on any sensory experience that resonates, making our grounding techniques personal and practical. Reframing is our second primary coping mechanism and a potent tool that can turn a negative perspective into a positive one. By reframing, we identify our triggers and self-esteem issues and change how we react and respond to them. I mean, there are always multiple perspectives to any situation. And while we cannot control everything that happens, we can control how we react and respond. And this perspective reassures us that we have the power to shift our mindset, instilling a sense of hope and optimism in our journey to manage anxiety and stress. One standard example of reframing is viewing a problem or issue as a challenge or opportunity. For instance, instead of seeing a disagreement as an argument, we can reframe it as a chance to understand another perspective. Our problems, once acknowledged, become solutions. Our issues, once addressed, are resolved. In a snowstorm, we can either be housebound and despondent, or take the sleds and ice skates out of the closet and enjoy the day. Experts agree that positive reframing is critical for emotional well-being. And unhappiness and disillusionment, anxiety, pejorative self-appraisal, and all the other adversities in our lives negatively impact our self-esteem. Positivity regenerates it. It's as simple as that, offering reassurance in the face of emotional challenges. Okay, finally, we have rational response, which is the ability to address our negative emotions with logic and reason, rather than letting them control us. Our automatic response to everything is emotional, but there is a profound sense of relief and empowerment in knowing that we can address these negative emotions rationally. A rational response is a logical, self-affirming counter to our fears, issues of self-esteem, and automatic negative thoughts, providing control in the face of adversity. We first identify the fear-provoking situation. Where are we when we feel anxious or apprehensive, and what activities are involved? What are we thinking? What are we doing? Who and what do we avoid because of our insecure feelings? So we then unpack our fears and apprehensions by asking ourselves, what is problematic about the situation? How do I feel physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually? What is my specific concern or worry? What is the worst thing that could happen to me? What might happen to me? See, by answering these questions, we can better understand our fears and anxieties and triggers. Now, the next step is unmasking our corresponding automatic negative thoughts. Understanding what an automatic negative thought entails is a key part of this process. Automatic negative thoughts, or ANTs, are anxiety-provoking thoughts, emotions, and images that occur in anticipation of or in reaction to our fears and anxieties. They are immediate, involuntary emotional responses to our triggers, unpleasant expressions of our negative self-appraisal that define who we think we are, who we think others think we are, and how we express those feelings. Spontaneous, self-defeating thoughts like, I am incompetent, no one will talk to me, I'll do something stupid, I'm a loser. The self-reflection and analyzing all this information are crucial processes and empowering tools that allow us to generate rational responses. And this process of introspection encourages us to understand ourselves better and respond to our fears and anxieties more rationally and constructively, putting us in the driver's seat of our reactions and responses to situational triggers, going from the emotional to the intellectual. We have identified the fear-provoking situation, which is the powerful step that initiates the response. We then unpack our associated fears and apprehensions, shedding light on our corresponding automatic negative thoughts. We analyze and examine these associated fears and corresponding ANTs to understand the irrationality of our anxieties. With this information, we can now devise rational responses, alleviating the severity of our triggers and further strengthening our sense of control. These steps lead us on a transformative journey of reconstructing our thought patterns. We offset or overwhelm our toxic thoughts and behaviors with healthy, productive ones. The behavioral aspect is achieved through cognitive behavioral therapy, while proactive neuroplasticity, the deliberate, repetitive neural input of information, supports our neurological restructuring, paving the way for positive change. So, grounding, reframing, and rational response are the primary or master coping mechanisms. They're not just tools, but trusted guides that lead us through our journey, reassuring us of our potential to manage our mental health and emotional well-being. In our next video, Coping Mechanisms Part 2, we will discuss some of our secondary coping mechanisms. Once again, the effectiveness of secondary coping methods depends upon the individual and the situation. Mechanisms can include controlled breathing, where we learn to manipulate our vagus nerve, character focus, distractions and diversions, persona, muscle relaxation, slow talk, and a multitude of other coping mechanisms. Of course, any healthy coping mechanism that alleviates our stressful situations qualifies as an adaptive coping mechanism. And we should always be aware and make note of common coping mechanisms that we employ daily. Remember, the most personal and obvious coping mechanisms are often the most effective, as they are tailored to our unique needs and experiences.